Hello everyone and welcome to my coloring corner. Today we're going to take a look at watercolor pencils and different things that I've been trying out and see if they work. So I've got different sets of watercolor pencils here. I've got the Deli here. I've got some Anshan here. I also have the original set of watercolor pencils that I started with and started actually coloring with as my regular pencils. I didn't realize that they were watercolor pencils, and these are the Fine Touch that you can get at Michael's. But what we're going to be working on, of course, we've got the watercolor pencils. We also have this set of watercolor pencils that are from my Sketchbox. Sketchbox is a subscription art supply box. They send you little samples of different brands and stuff like that. So along with that, of course, I have brushes, and I have water brushes, all different sizes here. I have filled them up with water. Each of these brushes, of course, are a different size used for different things. I also have regular brushes, and I'm missing my fan brush, so just 1 second. I gotta find my fan brush. I like my fan brush. Nope, that's not it. Of course, I have a drawer full of stuff here that I've been playing with and trying out, and I stuck it back in here. Now I can't find it. There it is, way back there. And I have a very small, fine fan brush because there's a couple of different things that I want to try with that. All right, so on top of all of that fun stuff, one of the things that I've been working with is this. It's a satin glazing liquid by Golden. It is used to extend the movability of acrylic paint. I saw somebody had used it on one of their colorings, and it looked absolutely gorgeous. So, of course, I looked it up, and sure enough, that's something that they do use this for, to use on regular paper or cardstock so that it doesn't warp the paper too much. However, I put it on these two pieces of paper. This one here, as you can probably see, maybe, all of the ink bled. I think it was too soon after I printed the picture. So unfortunately, this one bled quite badly, and both of the papers, this one here didn't do too badly on bleeding. There was a couple of spots, and this one was printed months and months and months ago. So it does seem to lift up some of that ink, even if it's been a long period of time. But as you can see with both of these papers, they're both warped. Hold on a sec. I've got a cord in the way there. There we go. Both of them warped. Both of them curled up. So I don't know if it is going to do any good for keeping that paper flat. However, I did not tape these down, and I probably should have, so that they could dry completely flat. If I would have taped it down and stretched it, maybe it would have dried completely flat. But because I didn't do that, I may have messed it up myself pretty bad. So now, of course, I do have an acid-free paint watercolor paper. This is a 67 pound 25 sheet watercolor paper. It will go through my printer. I also have 30 sheets of the 300 GSM. And this, of course, is quite a bit thicker. And we'll be playing with that more as the weeks go by. I've got a couple of things I want to experiment with it. But with this paper, I don't think I would have to tape it down and stretch it. I could, but it won't go through my printer. So I'm going to have to try different things and see what we can do to use this thick binder of paper that I bought, because I don't like things going to waste. And with this one, I can't figure out, it's terrible. I can't figure out which side to put in the printer, because they say that one side is smoother than the other, and both sides feel the same to me. I'm suspecting that it's the top side that goes in the printer and the back side that gets printed on, but I'm not positive, because I tried it on a different painting and it buckled. So I don't think 67 pound is quite strong enough. What I'm looking for right now is, of course, my tape that I had out that somebody moved. I had this all set up last night and somebody moved my things. So I'm hoping they just thought, oh, that shouldn't be out, and put it away for me. But it doesn't look like it. So I think somebody swiped it. Well, I can't say swiped it. May have borrowed it for something else. And I hate it when they borrow my stuff. Okay, so I've got another roll here. Now this is just regular masking tape. You should use a painter's tape for it. But like I said, my painter's tape has disappeared. So we'll just use the regular masking tape. And I will use an X-Acto blade to cut it off the board. So what we're going to do is we're going to tape this off and see if we can stretch it a little bit. So you just tape it to your board, go up to the top as close as possible. And try to get it as flat as possible. Now this is the tricky part, because I'm trying to get this completely flat, and of course it's curly, so it's not going to lay completely flat. And we will play with this picture because it didn't bleed as bad as the other picture. Excuse me. Sorry about that, guys. I suddenly had a tickle in my throat. And as you can see, I'm just trying, this one here is a little thick, but I'm just trying to get the very, very edge of the paper under the tape, just to give it that ability to be flat. And like I said, this is not the ideal tape for this. I would definitely suggest a different tape, because this may, after a little bit of time, when you go to peel it up, it may decide that it's going to tear your paper. So if you don't want your paper torn, you can of course remove that with a X-Acto blade or gently peel it up. Now we've got it almost flat here. I would rather it be a little bit more flat, but I think that's the best we're going to be able to do. And I think if I would have done this before putting the golden on it, it may have dried flat. However, the one thing that I don't like is the fact that it did lift the ink, the printer ink. So I don't like that. But what we're going to do is we're going to color this with the colored pencils, with the watercolor pencils. And then we're going to use a paint brush, and we're going to go through and move some of that paint around and try to get it to be, what's the best word for it? Try to paint as it was a watercolor. And we're going to see if this golden, first of all, can be colored on top of. And second of all, if it helps maintain that level of binding, so it doesn't peel up all the paper, it doesn't make things really, really buckle. Like I said, this sheet is already buckled a little bit, which is probably my fault because I didn't bind it. I didn't get it flat beforehand. So I'm just using the Anchan. The reason why I'm using this one is because it is a very pastel-y color. And I want the inside of the cup to be a pastel-y color. And I'll use up, some from each set and see if we can get a watercolor effect. Okay, so there's our yellow. Now, like I said, I've already activated these pens. Basically, what you do is you take this end off, like this. It screws off. You fill that up, line it back up, line it back up, come on, and then screw it back on. And then give it a light squeeze. Now I do have a piece of paper here because I don't want it to be horribly wet. And just give it a light squeeze until a little bit of water comes out and take the water, excess water off. So I'm not seeing any major pilling, which is one of the things that I absolutely hate about watercolor. Both watercolor markers as well as watercolor paint. Now I'm going to switch you over. This is going to be a little difficult, but I'm going to try to switch you over to this other camera. But I've got to move things around here so that I can get you over there and still be able to work. Oh, I taped myself to my desk. All right, let's slide you on over here. And we're going to do this and turn this light on. Come on, turn on. There we go. So that you can see a little bit more of what's going on. So as you can see the pigment is getting broken down by the water. This is an Anshan watercolor pencil, and I have used these before, and I do like them. I think the macaron colors in them, the really pastel-y macaron colors in them, are wonderful. They can be used wet or dry, which is really kind of cool to me too. Let's turn that down a little bit here for you so you can actually see the color. Now this is currently wet, but I'm not seeing any sort of pilling, which is good. So we're going to take one of the other pencils here. This is a deli, and you sharpen them the same way you would any other colored pencil. You put it in a pencil sharpener and you sharpen it. Okay, so this is a deli. Most watercolor pencils will say watercolor pencil, or they'll have this little paintbrush on them. So if it's got a little paintbrush on it, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a watercolor watercolor pencil. Now I'm only going to do the edges here, and then I'm going to see if I can bring that paint all the way through with the paintbrush. See if we can paint that down. Now, another way that you can use most watercolor pencils is by dipping the tip of the pencil in water. This will help you spread that pencil paint color around quite a bit more than just by coloring it. And it will give you a bit of a smoother color. So for example, and I'll do it on one of the larger sections because you'll be putting in a little bit more of a color in those larger sections. Now, I really enjoy these pencils because they are extremely well pigmented. And they don't, oh, what's the word? They don't have any difficulties with most papers. However, like I said, with watercolors, it's a little bit more difficult when you're doing something with watercolor because you have to, A, have the right kind of paper, or B, be very, very, very careful on how much water you put on, or coat your page in a agent that will assist you in keeping that from buckling. Now, I have seen a couple of other different agents that you can use. Golden is the one that I bought, and I will probably end up buying a couple of others just to see which ones are better. I did prep this 24 hours in advance, so I did prep this yesterday so that it would have plenty of time to dry before I started using it because I didn't want to put water on top of it and have it go all gummy. I did use a very, very, very light layer, and I used a paintbrush to do that. And I will grab another picture here in a little bit after we see how this paint moves, and we'll take a look at how that's applied, or how I applied it, because it is a little bit tricky. And after I made this area bleed, I was able to do most of this without making it bleed. But like I said, it was a little bit trickier. And the colored pencil is going down quite well on top of it, so that's really good. And of course, during this month, we'll be going through different watercolor products, different watercolor techniques, things like that, with different products that I have acquired in the last little while. All right. Just going around the spots on the teacup here. These are quite nice pencils. I really enjoy the Deli brand. Their oil-based pencils are really nice as well. And I do believe they have a bigger set than I have. I think I only have a 24 or 48 pack of these pencils. But I don't do a huge amount of watercoloring. I try to avoid it during most instances, because I'm not very good at it and I don't like the way that it buckles the paper. Now, if I can find a way, a way to do this without buckling the paper, it would make watercoloring so much more fun for me, and I would probably enjoy it a lot more. So what we're doing is we're just pulling that paint from those edges into the center of the cup. I'm trying really, really hard not to hit those other little spots, but if you do, that's fine too. You can just go over it with a different color. I do have another set of watercolor pencils that I got in yesterday, but I haven't tried them or swatched them yet. So I will be reviewing those on Friday when we do our fun stuff. So as you can see, it gives that very nice watercolor effect. Nice and light. You can definitely pull in that color from different areas. You can, of course, use different pens. Need this one, I think. I'm just going to activate this one. You just use different pens for different areas. So if you really, really want to make sure that you don't get into those areas that you haven't covered with the colored pencil, you can definitely use a different paintbrush or different paint pen, watercolor pen, water pen, whatever you want to call them. And move that paint around. Now another thing that you can do with these, which I just did, is you can just dip them in a bit of water. If you don't want a whole bunch of water on it, you can just dip it. Now I'm not being overly careful here, so I'm going to go back to this one. And so far this golden seems to be working pretty well. I don't see a whole bunch of lift up. It's also helping me move this paint around without it drying too quickly. It's another thing with watercolor paint sometimes, especially if you're not using a lot of water, is it will dry really, really fast and you won't get that watercolor effect that you want. Of course, you can just reactivate it with some more water, so it's not like it's permanently there like that. Now, another thing that it claims is that once you have a layer down, you can add more layers to it in different colors. So we're going to try that as well. Like I said, this is just an experiment. I can't say that this is going to be absolutely gorgeous, but we're gonna play with these, try to figure them out. And that's why I called the video Figuring Out Watercolor, because that's what we're doing right now, is we're just trying to figure them out. Figure out the best way to use them, as well as the best way to use them for our coloring, which is another big factor. Is this something that you can use for your coloring on your coloring books? And with I didn't try it on any books, to be honest. Um, I was a little afraid. So I did try it on this first, and with the way that the paper buckled, it worried me. So if you're going to use this on your coloring books, what I would suggest is do a test page, like on your this book belongs to or something. Tape it down and do a test page, and make sure that that ink isn't going to spread on you. Maybe we'll try it on a coloring book page, and we'll see how it does laying down. But I am a little afraid, just so you know. All right, so we're going to let's take a darker blue here. Now, another thing that you can do with watercolor pencils is you can take a bit of water. So I've got some water here, and you can just dip the tip of your pencil into the water and just let that paint ooze out. And this is my preferred way of using watercolor pencils, because it doesn't put too much water on the page, but it still gives you that thick, creamy coloring. The only thing that I do suggest, of course, is that once you feel that scratch of dry pencil, that you add a little bit more water. And if you find, like I have right here, in this area right here, that you're getting little lines like that, just take your water brush pen and straighten them out. So it does seem to be letting me blend those two colors together quite nicely. Now, of course, I am doing a light to a dark to a light, so it's not too bad. Now, if we were to be using a green or something, which I think we will try. Always the perfectionist colorist. I'm trying not to go over the lines. So as you can see, it put down quite a bit of pigment to a point where I can move it almost entirely over this entire cup. So it does make the color saturation very, very, very strong. And like I said, with the watercolor effects that you can do here, it's pretty cool. So let's take, say, this one here, and we're going to do pretty much the same thing. I'm just going to dip it, and then we're just going to add it to this blue. And dip it again. So it seems to be blending okay as it colors. Let's see how it does with the brush. I'm just going to rinse the brush. And is it going to give us that watery color effect that we want from watercolors? Or is it just going to mute the color? Seems to be blending pretty good though. I can see the page is buckling quite a bit. So this is definitely something, of course, with watercolor, it's one of those things that you have to give it some drying time. Working large areas for long periods of time is just going to cause some issues. But one of the issues, one of my pet peeves, absolutely hate issues about watercolor is a pilling of the paper. So if you put too much water or any water on a coloring or a paper and then rub it around with your brush or your pencil, you're going to get a pilling effect. So what I mean by that is the paper starts lifting up. And when it starts doing that, it drives me crazy. So it has blended quite nicely. It's given us that nice watercolor effect of pink to blue, which is really cool. I really like that. I think I'm going to actually take this, give it a dip, and just finish this area here with the same effect. And all I'm doing is I'm laying the paint down. I have wet the tip of the pencil. So what's happening is it's just putting pure paint right down in a nice thick layer. If you find that you're picking up other paint because it's still wet, just rinse off your pencil, give it a wipe, that sort of thing. All right. So now we're going to take our brush and we're going to just drag that color into the rest of the cup. I like the effect that watercolor gives. And it's really, really is relaxing if you have the right tools. Um, the paper is what usually gets me irritable. Don't like the feeling or the look of the buckling paper. My brush a little bit wetter here. Now I am going right over top of the little polka dots and giving him that little bit of color. Okay, so that's how that is done with a watercolor pencil. Of course, we have all different watercolor mediums that are available to us. There's pencils, there's pens, there's markers, there's crayons, and we will be looking at quite a few of those. We have some watercolor pens, we have some watercolor crayons, we have some watercolor pencils, and of course we have some watercolor paint palettes. So we will be looking more and more at different mediums that are available for watercolor um, throughout February, which of course to me is an aquatic month because that is the astral sign for February is Aquarius and Pisces. And my sister is born in February, so of course it makes, makes a lot of sense to me to celebrate the month. Now, of course, it is also a um, Black Awareness Month as well. So maybe we'll combine the two or something. I don't know. I don't know how I'd combine the two. I can barely color dark skin with a regular pencil. I don't know how I'd do it with paint pencils, but I don't mind giving it a try. Of course, I will try maybe to do it offline. So if I horribly mess it up, you guys don't have to see it. All right, so I'm just finishing off the bottom of the cup here. I'm going to add that pink, I think, straight to the bottom here as well. And of course, the perfectionist in me is trying to color this as perfect as possible instead of, just dealing with it as an experiment. Because this is a printed page, I can always reprint it. so just going to bring those colors together. The one good thing about paint is you can make it go in the direction you want. And with watercolor paint, if you really want to, especially in larger pictures, you can make it do all sorts of things. Okay. So, for example, if I wanted to, I could do little tiny spots. Try not to put too much water on it. Now, the one thing that I will say about this cover stuff that we've used is it does seem to be keeping the water from absorbing too deep into the paper too quickly. So, which is a good thing, especially if you're using acrylics or don't want things to dry too quickly. Now what I'm doing with the paint pen here is I'm just soaking up any excess water. From those spots. Now, if I had a spray bottle, this would probably be a lot easier. But I don't, so. So as you can see, when you do that, you end up with a white spot. It's pushed, that water has pushed that paint out of the way and lightened those areas. Now, of course, you can do a dabbing effect. If you put down too much water, you can just take your paper towel and just dab it. And it does pretty much the same thing as picking it up with the water brush, with probably less cumbersomeness. All right, now that is how we deal with watercolor pencils and painting them with these watercolor brushes. Now, you can also use a regular brush, which is a little bit more tedious. Let's just add a bit of this. And I'm going to color it until it's dry. I can't sharpen it until it's dried out, otherwise it's going to gum up my sharpener. That's another thing, is if you do dip your pencils, make sure you have a hand sharpener available, because putting this through, say, the Dahl 133 or your electric sharpener, when it's wet, will make a horrible mess. So just throwing that out there for you. It'll make a mess of your sharpener, that's for sure. So now what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to see if these areas that the ink bled, like right here where the ink bled from the printer, is going to bleed any more, or if we're going to be able to salvage the picture just by painting over top of it. Like I said, right now I'm just doing my best to show the colors and the way they move. I apologize for the messiness because it is a bit messy. So I'm just putting in some blue here with the pink. And of course, like I said, I'm going to move that all down just the same way I did on the teacup. The other really good thing about watercolor is it's really, really forgiving of a rough color. So if you've colored something in really, really rough, like I am right now, in watercolor, that watercolor process is actually going to make it look a lot smoother, a lot nicer than it does to start with. So I'm going to take my brush and I'm just going to move that color around, bring it all together, move it all down. And of course, the more water you put on your brush and leave on your brush, the more movement you have. So if you don't want it to move a whole lot, lessen the amount of water that you have on your brush. You want it to move a whole lot, add more water to your brush. And I didn't put any color under here. So with the water brushes themselves, it does give you the ability to control how much water is going onto your brush. Where with the manual brushes like this one, unless you remember to wipe it and know how much you're wiping off each time you wipe it, it makes it a lot more difficult to judge your water penetration. So if I wanted, for example, to have left all of that color on there, I would have done it a little bit drier. But I wanted to change the look of that rough coloring that I did. So in order to do that, you add water and you just blend it out. Now, of course, if you dry off your paintbrush after going over some colors, rinse it off and dry it off, you can move those colors around a little bit and lift some of that color up. And I dropped my paper towel. So as you can see here, I have that dark line still. So I'm just taking the edge of the brush and blending it into the rest of the picture. But I'm turning my brush a little bit as I go to not spread too much more of it into the picture because I want it to stay on that edge. Now I'm not finding any further bleed from the ink in this area. I am saturating it quite a bit, and I am doing that on purpose. There is no bleed out for the pencils or further bleed out from the ink that bled out while I was doing the initial coating with the additive. And like I said, if I had dried this flat or taped it down when I put the additive on, it may have been a different story with the curling because I'm not getting as much movement as I would have if I didn't, if I would have done it bare onto paper. Now, of course, even the best of paper is going to get some movement. It's going to curl. It's just the nature of wet things on paper. So, with that, that is how we color with watercolor pencils. We lay down the color, and I know we've only used 3 or 4 colors here, but you lay down the color. And of course, like I said, you can dip your colors, you can dip your pencils. I need a manual sharpener just because I have dipped this pencil and I want it to be a sharper point. So I'm going to grab my manual pencil sharpener here. And I'm going to sharpen this up. Now, the one thing that you have to be really careful of when sharpening a watercolor pencil that you've used wet is making sure that it doesn't break, because it's going to be very, very soft at this point. And this one just keeps on breaking. So I've got it to a point by sharpening it in a different manner, which is fine. That's all I needed. Okay, so I've got this sharpened to a nice point, and we're going to color this bubble. And we're going to add some blues. And we're going to add some yellows. And I'm going to add a little bit more pink there. And a bit of the darker blue. Okay, so I've got this bubble pretty much covered. Now we're going to take one of the larger pens and we're just going to let the water fall on it. We're just going to let it do its work. And then we're going to take our paper towel and we're just going to dab it. And I dabbed it a little bit too hard, but as you can see, you can go back in with your watercolor pencil and just put in a little bit more color in those little areas that you want to put those colors in. But this is a fantastic way of doing a nice little bubble. And this area didn't bubble up. I wanted to show you that. All right, so we're going to take our big brush here. We're going to run it through some water here because I think I still have some medium on it from yesterday. And I'm going to rinse that off, get it all dry, and then we're going to take a different picture. We're going to peel this one off gently and see how bad it has rippled. Normally you would not do this until it was dry, so it's going to buckle a little bit, and of course I will show you in a different video how badly and how that worked. And I just tore the top off. Like I said, this tape is not the best for it. And this is why. So as you can see, the tape is tearing the page. And I will fix that later with an X-Acto blade. So other than the original bend that we had in the page from the medium, okay, so we had that original bend in the page from the medium to begin with. We do have a slight buckling here on the part that we colored with the water. Now, if I had done this, and this one here didn't buckle at all. So if I had done this and taped this down previously, before I put the medium on, it may have avoided the buckling. So we're going to try that again, but on a coloring book page. So I am going to, take a page. I'm going to do a line art. I think that the grayscale has too much ink in it to do this. So I'm going to see if I have any pages here. Let's see. I want to do it in a book that isn't my favorite, which is hard for me because they're all my favorites. All right, so I'm going to use the practice book from Norberg and Linden because it is 100 grams. It is a little bit, tiny bit thicker than coloring book paper, but it's not a lot thicker. And it's small enough that it shouldn't take us all day to cover it. Now I will cover this and then I will put it aside for tomorrow and use possibly a watercolor pen on it and see how that does. Oh, that's a nice one. can do a butterfly or some flowers. I don't know why I'm looking at the pictures. It's just an experimentation. So I'm going to stop looking at the pictures and I'm just going to grab a page. And tear it out and hopefully not completely murder it with the tape. Or completely murder the tape. Okay. Oh, this video is going to be longer than normal. All right. So in this part of the video, what we're going to do is we're going to coat this picture. This is from the Norberg and Linden book, the sample book that they put out with their pencils. And we're going to coat it with the golden. See if I can fix that because I just mangled my tape. So we've looked at it after I've put it on and we've painted on it, and it seems to do quite well. Right now what we're doing is fixing my tape because I made a mess. And we're just taping off the edges of this page. Of course, I have the wrong tape for this. So when you do this, try to make sure that you have either painter's tape or that sort of thing that isn't going to tear the paper when you have it down, because this is going to tear the paper. So especially if I don't, take it off properly. All right, so we've got that down. Now I'm going to zoom you out a bit so that you can see what I'm doing. Over the entire page. All right. Okay, so we've got the entire page here. Well, most of it anyway that you can see. So I'm going to zoom you out just a little bit more. And I'm going to turn that light on a little bit brighter. And I'm going to focus you in just a bit. There we go. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this brush, if I can find where I put it, this brush here, and we're going to take this satin glazing liquid. Now I found that it works best if applied directly to the brush. I don't know about on coloring book paper because I don't know if it's going to bleed. So apply it straight to the brush and test it first. So this paper isn't bleeding, which is awesome. So it's going to work a lot better. Oops, I just made a big old mess. Just apply it everywhere in a thin coat. That's probably enough to do the entire page in the amount that just, came off. So just thin coat it right across the whole page. Check and make sure that you have a good thin coat. And as you can see, it's already starting to buckle that paper up a little bit right here in the middle because it's wet. So what I'm hoping is when it dries, it will flatten back down. Now I'm not getting any color bleed from the printer ink, which is awesome. But that's how you apply this. And you just make sure that you've covered all the areas that you're going to be coloring. And then you let it dry. And then tomorrow, in another part of this wonderful segment, we will color it. And we will use a different watercolor medium to color this. I think we may even use watercolor pens this time around. But we will see how it does. I'm going to actually lift this up a little bit and see if I can get it flatter now that it's wet. I'm just stretching the paper a little bit, trying to get it as flat as we can get it. There we go. So that's nice and flat. There's only a couple of little ripples in there. We'll leave it to dry overnight and see how that works out tomorrow. This is about the same thickness as coloring book paper, so I think it'll work out quite well. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope I was helpful. Again, the liquid that I use to prime the pages is called Satin Glazing Liquid. It did quite well on this one. The watercolor didn't bleed out of the lines from where I put it. You know, of course, little areas I colored over the lines. This is a printed page, and doing the satin glaze over a printed page did cause me some issues. So when you are doing it on a printed page, what I would suggest you do, and I suggest you do this from the start of even your coloring book pages, is take a small amount of the liquid onto your brush and just test it. If you can go over that without it pulling that color off, then you can continue the rest of the way across the page. However, if you get streaks like this, or like this, or like this, or this big one down here, I would suggest that you very, very gently and very, very carefully, and that's how I did the rest of this after I found that it was doing that, is take just a little tiny bit and dab it and do a dab spread so that you're not pulling that ink. See, what happens is you pull the ink and it continues to pull it and bleed it into what you're covering up. Just getting that off my paintbrush. So make sure that first of all you test an area. Test a small area. If you find that it is pulling ink off of that area with a stroke, go to dabbing so that you don't ruin the picture. Now, like I said, this is printer ink. This is coloring book ink. So far I don't see any bleed from the coloring book ink. So we will see how it turns out tomorrow, and I will do another watercolor episode tomorrow during Work in Progress Wednesday. And we will be doing this for our work in progress. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching. I do hope that you enjoyed this video, found it useful, entertaining, and all that fun stuff. Of course, like, comment, and subscribe. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you have any suggestions on different things that you want to see in watercolor, coloring, painting, and that sort of thing, leave me a comment below in the comment department, in the comment section, I should say. All of the links for these products will be listed below. I will throw out there just the information and the disclaimer that I am now an Amazon affiliate. So what that means is that every link that you click on my YouTube channel will have an affiliate link attachment, which will give me a couple of cents every time you buy something by clicking that link. So help out the channel a little bit and click the links. Of course, if that product is something that you want to buy, buy it through that link. It does help me out quite a bit. Well, enough. And of course, that is never at a cost to you. Of course, remember to relax, color, and stay safe. I hope you enjoyed this Tips and Tricks Tuesday. Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye for now.